Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome Dr. Felder and Board President Silvestri and probably Mr. Hall, at least to start here down. And thank you for all the other board members who are here. I see the front, we got the front row of the, I think the entire board, minus one, maybe. Is Gracie here? I don't see Gracie, yeah. Okay. But the vast majority of the board, thank you all for being here. So just to get us started here, and then I'll kick it to, I want to turn to the board president and Dr. Felder to make some remarks, and then to staff, and then we'll get to the discussion, which I think is most of our afternoon. I've really appreciated the ongoing conversations with the public and with my colleagues since the Education and Culture Committee made its recommendation last week to add an additional $49.5 million to the FY25 operating budget for MCPS to close the gap between the board's request and the county executive's budget. Earlier this week, the council had the wonderful opportunity during this Educator Appreciation Week to celebrate educators and education and support professionals, including the newly minted 24-25 Teacher of the Year, Melissa Porter Parks, and the Support Services Employee of the Year, Bruno Smith, as well as many other teachers and paraeducators, nurses, counselors, and school lunch heroes who support our students and families every day. Melissa and Bruno are among the 25,000 plus educators and staff in our public school system, a school system that under law must provide all children with a free and appropriate education with any necessary supports. One thing that's become very clear to me over the last 6 years, going on 6 years on the E&C committee, and over the last 41 plus here in Montgomery County as a resident, is that the sheer scale and increasing needs of MCPS are not widely known. In FY24, for example, last year, MCPS received around $3.2 billion for operating expenses, big number, but more than $2.6 billion of that, or nearly 90%, supports the salaries and benefits of MCPS 25,000 employees. Not movable unless you renegotiate contracts and lower takeaway benefits. For the context, those 25,000 employees, that's more than 15,000 of our government employees, where we have about 10,000 government employees. And that other side of government, which we've done the rest of this week, accounts for $3.9 billion of our budget, right? So you often hear half the budget. It's not quite half the budget. It's less than half the budget. But with 15,000 more employees, 90% of whom comprise that budget. So when you take that much smaller pie to work with, it gets even smaller. All the other functions within the school system. Transportation, for example, 1,100 school buses. My daughters were on a few this morning, versus 400 school buses, 400 buses on Ride-On, the whole system. That's $200 million more just for transportation. 1/3 of the remaining $600 million after you take staff, salary, and benefits. So we're down to $400 million. That's not, you haven't fed anybody yet. You haven't fixed a facility in our 211 schools and additional buildings. You haven't provided any instructional material. Chromebooks, I know my daughter's probably broken probably a few. Furniture, equipment, utilities, contractual services, technology, security, and the like. I mention all the time, we feed more people than Disney World every day, 90,000. We transport over 100,000 students every day. MCPS is huge, and our 160,000 students that we serve are full of promise and potential. And while we are considered one of the wealthiest counties in the region, our public schools represent a significant number of low-income families and students, like I was. 45%, 72,000 of 160,000 are on free and reduced meals. And if you take the kids that have been on free and reduced meals at some point, you get over 50% of our population. That's a marker for poverty. There's also a growing need for special education services, which are required under law. In the last 2 years, we saw a 44% increase in 504 students who have a mental or physical disability, just a dramatic increase. So the context I just wanted to set is important as we enter the conversation today, to go beyond just the numbers And that's what the Education Culture Committee has done over the last year since I took over as chair. And we had over 21 work sessions, nearly 50 hours of discussion, covering numerous topics related to all the things I just discussed and more, digging deep into the base budget, individual departments and programs, academic performance, and financial updates on expenditures. We focused heavily on academics, safety, fiscal operations, and internal and external accountability. I appreciate the council president and my committee members. We sent a memo today and have worked with MCPS on additional levels of accountability that we're going to include in the budget resolution. But we've been doing this work in the level of detail. I've really appreciated the partnership with Ms. McGuire as a staff and with us to get back to all of our many questions. When we talk about those 72,000 students who are on free and reduced lunch or in poverty, that means we have thousands of students who can't focus necessarily because they lack access to food. I'm reminded of one of those students at Albert Einstein at one of my visits who shared this with me on a recent tour. He was like, a lot of our kids notice the disparities in food access. When we talk about the rise in students with special education, or Section 504, that means limited number of counselors and paraeducators to serve that we have are overburdened, and they're working 2 and 3 jobs. They've come to us asking for more help in their classroom, begging. When some paraeducators were assigned, were supposed to be reassigned or are going to be reassigned from Darnestown Early Education Center, we heard probably of the 200 people that we heard from, probably, I don't know how many, but a large number came and said, don't take those paraeducators away. That's how important they are to the lives of their children. But they're still dealing with these low wages. So I'm going to turn it to the board president and the superintendent and then to staff to cover anything I missed. But in the packet, Ms. McGuire as always did a great packet. The Board of Education's requested funding for MCPS totaled $187.9 million and included $79.5 million for salaries and benefits and wages, $41.8 million for the employee benefit plan, which we discussed that earlier in some regard, $28.6 million for inflation, rate changes, enrollment changes, and new space, $53 million for priority programs, including ESSER items that were replaced. Remember last year, there were $120 million in items that, due to our budget action last year, had to be moved over to ESSER and these are services like social workers and other really important services that were happening with that one-time money just because you had to do it. It also includes $15 million in reductions, in a reduction of almost 50 FTEs or people in efficiencies within the non-school-based staff. The county executive then cut $60.1 million from the board's request, their updated request, which included $5 million extra for special education. The committee asked MCPS to provide the council with additional non-recommended reductions, knowing that it would be challenging to meet the full request. We evaluated that range of potential reductions and proposed an amount that was less than the board's request that aligned with the changes they could make around staff development, teachers. The committee unanimously recommended this, adding $49.5 million to close the gap. And in our view, over our many sessions and dives into the deep budget, MCPS has presented a clear need for the funding to meet ongoing obligations, to provide counselors and psychologists and security equipment and stipends for restorative justice, among other essential items. As noted in the packet, the committee recognized a $3 million gain from interest earnings, which adjusted the recommendation down to $46.5 million tax-supported dollars. We recognize that the Board of Education, as the duly elected body governing MCPS, will make final determinations on whatever final amount the council approves, with an understanding of the council's intent. But we also appreciate your partnership, even up until late last night and this morning and today, about what these funding levels could mean, and I know we'll discuss that today as far as cuts. This was not a largesse budget. This was a bare bones budget that was cut before we got it twice. The committee strongly believes that this money is necessary to support our students and families. We did recommend the approval of the board's technology modernization CIP project as well, but we also recommended the elimination of funding for the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Center. continue our trend on the E&C committee of saving money this year, and we request that MCPS come back later with more time on that plan and concept. And with that, I'd like to turn it to Ms. Silvestri and then Dr. Felder for any brief opening remarks.